Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I hope everyone is having a chance to enjoy our amazing South Florida community. And for those of you online that are not in South Florida, we're so sorry you're not here, but I certainly invite you to come on down and enjoy all that South Florida has to offer. You'll be able to see why I am so proud to call South Florida home. It is always a pleasure to be back at Concordia with so many familiar faces here. It is really starting to feel like family for me, and I just so enjoy and am so thankful for Concordia's incredible work. A big part of that is because the Concordia mission is close to my heart, so thank you so much for welcoming me back. And I always appreciate the work of OAS Secretary General Almagro for his help in convening this dynamic conversation. I particularly want to thank Nick Logothetis. Thank you for all that you do, Nick, and your brother George as well for Concordia. I know we all truly appreciate it. And of course, thanks to all the folks behind the scenes that make everything happen and that make everything at Concordia look seamless. Fresh off the Summit of the Americas, we really do have plenty to discuss. Sadly, many observers of this year's summit were more focused on who attended and less on what attendees actually did. Fortunately, a main takeaway from the summit was a strong recommitment to democracy, which will be my focus today. As President Biden so eloquently put it, democracy is not only the defining feature of American histories, but the essential ingredient to the America's futures. Democracy not only unites us, but we know it is best suited to confront the myriad of issues that our hemisphere faces. As always, those challenges are many. While a shrinking yet powerful fringe still denies its existence, the existential threat of climate change looms over all that we do. In South Florida, we feel the physical and fiscal impacts every day. I always say to my colleagues across the country, global warming and climate change is not a someday thing here in Florida, it is a right now thing. And as we all concluded at the summit in Los Angeles, a humane response to the mass migrations and growing food, job, and health insecurities that a warming planet produces is absolutely critical. Add to that we are still navigating through a deadly pandemic and the global inflation it's inflicted on those least able to afford it. As if that were not enough, a vicious war of aggression in the Balkans driven by a single Kremlin despot ripples across our entire hemisphere by driving up fuel and food costs even higher. Any one of these challenges breeds violence, suffering, and death. Together, it's a toxic recipe for nationalism, unrest, and tyranny. But to circle back to our common belief that's also my focus today, our most potent weapon to confront all of these threats and root out their causes is an abundance of healthy democracies that rest upon stable foundations of the rule of law and robust institutional checks and balances. It is the surest way to counter the ever-growing threat of authoritarianism. This rise in autocracy is, by now, well known. But I want to focus on one key element of this threat, the one which I believe is often the hardest to confront. And it is a factor that Concordia is an ideal forum to discuss. The critical issue is a willingness to confront our own autocrats. If we start from the premise that democracies are the best antidote to autocracy, inherent within that is that we must promote and protect a diversity of competing opinions. Yet a robust left-right dichotomy inherent in all democracies cannot dictate or prejudice how we view and confront autocrats. Put another way, political dogma cannot trump democracy. And I'll cite a pair of obvious examples. In Caracas, a leftist government rules Venezuela by deploying violence, misinformation, repression, and intimidation. By any neutral standard, a peaceful, prosperous, or democratic Venezuela does not now exist. Despite that, a coalition of democratic actors in Venezuela, including more conservative proponents, continue to pursue a dream of an independent and democratic future. Yet even though I come from a progressive political fold, I must put my own ideological sympathies aside. Because in places like Venezuela, it is actors to my political right who mount some of the most valorous challenges to this brutal narco regime of Nicolas Maduro. Until progress is made, I'm relieved that the Biden administration extended temporary protective status, or TPS, to over 300,000 Venezuelans who fled this cruel regime for our shores. Now they can continue to receive a critical shield of protection and peace of mind. Hopefully, the status for those still seeking refuge, who are just as endangered, can be redesignated. They, like so many, fled oppression for our democratic freedoms. Yet as they arrive, the shadow of the January 6th insurrection still hangs over our own American republic. With every January 6th committee hearing, the mutinous effort to subvert the will of the American people becomes more irrefutable. Tuesday's hearing proved that point yet again. From the very top of the last administration, we saw an organized, premeditated attempt to carry out a political coup, an unthinkable occurrence in the land of the free and the brave, until recently. I won't cite any of the ample, still smoldering evidence here, but what cannot be disputed is this: all democracies must have a peaceful transfer of power. Yet the world's longest-standing democracy just endured a deadly coup attempt to overturn a free and fair election. Thankfully, America's vibrant institutions and free press triumphed over the traitorous and deceitful attempt to install an autocracy. I'm proud that progressives stood firm against those efforts. At the same time, under unbearable pressure, many brave conservative judges, election officials, and lawyers stayed true to democracy and put country over party. These true patriots must be honored for their heroic work. Yet as America's last aspiring autocrat receives into a muck of treason in Mar-a-Lago, another one rises in Tallahassee. In just the last year, this powerful Florida executive sought to criminalize protest, speech, and academic freedom. He's waged war with the free press, marginalized and bullied LGBTQ+ families, and attacked the bodily autonomy of half the population. He attacked science, public health, and local community rule. For those unfamiliar with Florida politics, this is the body of work built by Governor Ron DeSantis. But this resume, as you know, was not just made for his re-election in Florida. It is being constructed for a national stage. For many, listening to the sound of my voice, these comments may come across as just partisan bluster. My long-standing criticism of the conservative DeSantis administration is well known. Yet so too are my vocal criticisms of the leftist regimes of Castro, Noriega, and Maduro. When it comes to despots, any dogmatic lens must be dropped. Which side of the spectrum despots spring from must not matter. Those who truly believe in democracy must be brave enough to confront their own. When it comes to autocracy, traditional left-right perspectives are often too restrictive and impede our ability to challenge political repression, especially in our own camp. To the chagrin of some leftist allies, allow me to focus my nonpartisan critical lens. In the face of autocratic trends, some of the most compelling defenses of democracy were carried out by conservatives, right in our own hemisphere. In Colombia, a few weeks ago, and in Chile, a few months before that, it was right-wing leaders who honored the tenets of democracy. Without the threat of violence or any big lies, they peacefully handed the keys of power over to unabashed leftists. In Florida, some of the most vocal calls for freedom and human rights come from the more conservative pockets of Florida's Cuban, Venezuelan, and Colombian communities. It is obvious, but well worth stating emphatically, no political dogma is immune to totalitarianism. For every Castro and Noriega, there's a Somoza and Pinochet. Regardless of our political stripes, we must be willing to call out all despots. Our primary allegiance must be to democracy, never autocracy. We must call out all despotic ideologues, no matter the political camp to which they lay claim. Reluctance to do so afflicts both sides of America's partisan aisle, because Maduro, Castro, and now Diaz-Canel co-opt, distort, and at times genuinely advance progressive ideals. Many fellow Democrats are averse to criticizing their tyrannical ways. Unquestionably, all three are repressive tyrants, and each one is intimately tied to the world's bloodiest despot today, Vladimir Putin. Yet criticizing them is tough for some progressives, inexplicably. A similar protective instinct often afflicts Republicans. Senate Leader McConnell and House Minority Leader McCarthy instantly condemned Trump for being responsible for January 6th. Yet neither of these men today will distance themselves in any serious way from him now. Among the rare Republicans who dare align themselves with the rule of law and democracy over Trump, you can be certain that they will be driven from their own party. For both McConnell and McCarthy, proximity to power overrides any allegiance to democracy. And you should just ask Congresswoman Cheney about how she feels about whether or not she's been driven from her own party. This is the way of authoritarianism. Yet while I make this case to discard political ideology where democracy is at stake, I'm under no illusion that it will occur. The promise of power is simply too intoxicating for the weak. But if we fail to call out our own despots, our whole hemisphere pays. We know that Russia pursues a strategy to grow Moscow's totalitarian influence in our hemisphere. Just ahead of its invasion of Ukraine, Russia unleashed a wave of Spanish-language disinformation into Latin America to spin its grotesque war by deploying outlets like Russia Today. We also must admit that Chinese repression policies will more quickly take hold with the help of its Belt and Road Initiative, vaccines, and other aid. Even if Putin falters from overreach in Ukraine, Beijing's influence will grow. While we must unite and aggressively confront these emerging realities, we also need to know how to rebuild from them. Latin America pioneered many legal tools to address authoritarian legacies, forming what we now call transitional justice. As autocrats rise and fall, we must be able to confront and recover from them. There are many ways to confront autocracy. President Biden recently announced at the Americas Summit an investment of $42 million into USAID activities to protect, defend, and promote civic space in Central America. Crucially, it will combat digital authoritarianism and promote independent media. Another way to do it is by making an all-in commitment to climate change. Conserving ecosystems and accelerating our transition to renewable energy will help foster stability and combat autocracy. We made these commitments in Los Angeles, including a new U.S.-Caribbean partnership on climate. These should all be popular, nonpartisan efforts, and so should working together to continually confront autocrats wherever and whenever they erode democracy. There are so many things we can all do to protect democracy. We can always criticize the accuracy or slant of any media coverage, but we must always defend the free press. We must challenge any and all mis- and disinformation, but never be someone who produces or parrots it. And we must lead by example. Like all good citizens, we must tune in, pay attention, and show up. And above all, we must commit to calling out our own side when it strays into authoritarian waters. Because frankly, the freedom you save may be your own. Thank you so much for sharing your time in this important forum with me today. And congratulations to Concordia on all the wonderful work. Thank you so much.